This is episode 14 of season 1 of Babylon 5, TKO, as in The Knockout. This is a filler episode, not an arc episode, and I remember it because it appeared at a very odd time here in the UK because of its subject matter. I'll talk about that a little bit later. The episode starts with a liner called the White Star coming into dock from Earth, and we see a rabbi and a man with what the rabbi calls an interesting calling disembarking into the arrivals lounge. Now, watching this again, and I haven't seen this for a long time, I didn't recall it massively, partly because of the reasons why it was on at an odd time. I half wondered if the guy who isn't the rabbi, it was a guy from Sequest DSV. I don't know if you remember that show, but it turns out he's not, and I'll tell you a little bit more about him later. On the main stretch, Garibaldi's got an eye out for trouble, and he spots two people exchanging a pouch for some sort of patches, and it turns out that they're dealing in slappers, and which are sort of stims. They're drugs applied through skin patches, and these ones are apparently legitimate, but they've been stolen from medbay supplies in some way, shape or form. So Garibaldi engages them in a fairly hostile fashion, throws them around, tries to punch them out, and he thinks they're both down for the count as he interrupts their deal. But it takes the man with an interesting calling, who's called Walker Smith, to take down the second human with a knife, who Garibaldi doesn't see coming, and he notes that Garibaldi never did learn to watch his back, so it seems that they know each other, and they arrange to catch up on old times in Red 5 in a bar called the Dugout, appropriately enough for a sports fan. In Ivanova's quarters, she's listening to some music, some jazz, and she's reading a book by Harlan Ellison. And Harlan Ellison is deeply associated with this series, being involved in its production. And apparently this book didn't actually exist. It was a mock-up done for this episode just to throw people off. And he actually took it round with him for a while after this episode to confuse people, thinking that they'd missed a book release by him. And I think eventually it or something like it did get made, but it was many, many years later. So it's a clever little nod. And of course, it means that he's also in universe for Babylon 5. So he exists in this particular version of Earth history. So nice. And I definitely didn't catch that the first time round, because I wouldn't have identified his name so readily. He's now passed away, sadly, but I think that that happened relatively recently, and JMS is still looking out for his affairs and his family, which is very good of him, sort of bloke he is. So there's a door chime at Ivanova's quarters, and it's Rabbi Kozlov who's come to see her, and he was a rabbi, obviously, who was on the liner earlier, and they are old acquaintances. They know each other and have done for many years, and he's here to talk to her about her father's death, which you may remember happened a few episodes back when she used the Gold Channel to speak to him as he was passing away. And she didn't make his funeral because of her. She felt that her obligations towards her duty post came first, basically. And the rabbi has her legacy from her father, Andre. He says that her father would have understood that she put her duty first because it's how he raised her. They then discuss a Jewish ceremony called the Shiva, and Ivanova says that she hasn't sat Shiva for her father, and the rabbi says that he's going to stay in the sanctuary area in Blue 3, and dinner is at 2000 hours, or as Ivanova has to explain to him, 8 p.m. So he's a very nice bloke. This is his first interstellar trip, so he's a little bit sort of in awe of the place and space in general. So in the bar, Garibaldi is catching up with Walker, and Walker had a shot at a title, in fact, sort of the big title on Earth. He's a boxer, but he wouldn't back down from taking on the corporate backed contender for the fight. And so he was comprehensively framed by the corporation concerned and basically hung out to dry so that he couldn't get a legitimate fight anywhere in the solar system. So he's here to fight in what's called the Mutai, the Trial of Blood. It's an alien combat game contest. So he's out to make a splash by taking on some snakeheads with a view to getting his title shot back. If he can get some infamy through participating in this contest, he thinks he's going to have a shot at a comeback, basically. That's if he survives the no-rules combat. The rabbi, meanwhile, has taken some initiative and he's gone to visit Sinclair, who wasn't actually aware of the death of Ivanova's father. So Garibaldi kept his promise to her and he never spilt the beans about the Gold Channel or indeed anything else, even to Sinclair. The rabbi explains the situation and Sinclair grants Ivanova leave without hesitation. It's just not something that she would have asked for herself, and the rabbi acknowledges that she's very private about such things. At dinner, fresh air, the rabbi is struggling with chopsticks and teal, a type of Centauri fish. It may or may not be kosher. It's not noted that her father didn't think people should go to space until they'd found peace on Earth, which of course they haven't quite mastered yet. The conversation makes clear the depth of the pain that Ivanova has over her relationship with her father, and unfortunately things get worse when she discovers the rabbi has taken the initiative with Sinclair, accusing him of trying to control her as her father did. She leaves, upset, leaving him saddened because he's trying to act in her best interests, but obviously he's stuffed his foot into his proverbial mouth. So Walker does not get off to a good start in trying to fight in the Mutai. He's looking for a gentleman called the Mutar Do to get admittance. There's sort of a Karate Kid vibe going on here in this sort of mocked up dojo sort of training ground. But apparently the Mutai is not for Earthers, and he gets his head handed to him by the Mutar Do himself, who's apparently sprightly for a 90-year-old. But someone did take an interest in him. Elsewhere, Garibaldi explains to him that he's misjudged the nature of the fight. It has a meaning to the off-worlders, snakeheads or not. It's not a prize fight for them. Walker just blows him off and is then approached by the alien called Caliban, who noted his earlier attempt to enter the contest, and he clearly has something in mind for him, and the two go off to have a little chat. Sinclair orders Ivanova to sit with him when she seeks to avoid the issue of taking leave about her father's death, asking her as a friend to express her grief for her father's loss. She declines, saying her feelings are her own, and while Sinclair lets her go, he encourages her to be clear in herself with what she's feeling. Walker persuades Garibaldi to come to the Mutai with him to watch the champion take on Adrazi. Respect is clearly important, but it's no holds barred. The champion wins pretty rapidly, and Walker issues him a direct challenge when the Mutar Do invites such challenges, and it can't be refused easily. So the Mutar Do deems the challenge worthy, as does the show Rin, the champion. I'm not sure what race he is. The other races who are sort of watching, I kind of recognise most of them, but I'm not sure what race he comes from. So there are 3 cycles to the fight, and it's apparent that Walker may have trouble just getting to it, as the crowd is not pleased that an Earther is trying to enter their fight. The rabbi has brought Ivanova's legacy, and she apologises for her behaviour, and he's brought a family heirloom, a salitzar, to her. I'm not sure what the significance of one is. It's a sort of large golden chalice, quite an old article, I believe. Ivanova feels that her father abandoned her. She knows that he wasn't a loving man by his nature, but that he did love her regardless of that, but didn't show her even after her mother started taking the drugs to suppress her telepathy when she really needed his love, and after, indeed, her brother passed away in the Earth-Minbari War. The rabbi realises that she cannot mourn and heal until she can forgive, and that's going to be very, very hard for her. So Walker and Garibaldi return to the training area of the Mutai, and Caliban tries to prepare Walker further for what's to come. He once issued a similar challenge himself, so I think he'd like to see somebody get their chance as well, and that's why he's interested in helping Walker. Uncle Yossol, the rabbi, is heading for home because he feels he's unable to help Susan further. Susan meets him as he prepares to board the White Star again. He reassures her that her father did care for her, as he does, and Ivanova then recalls the last words her father said to her on the Gold Channel in the moments before his death, and at the last moment calls Uncle Yussel back and asks him to help her sit Shiva. Walker defeats his sparring partner in practice because he's not a kickboxer, and Caliban doesn't seem to rate his chances. He's a very traditional sort of boxer, and the aliens are using a sort of kind of like mixed martial arts, that sort of technique. The Sports Channel, however, has picked up on Walker's story, and both he and Garibaldi know what he's up against. But he has faith he will learn from challenging the best. It's all a bit cheesy, but it's well meant. And at the Shiva, we discover something quite interesting, that Susan's father was a scholar, a Russian Jew, devoted to peace. And yet both his children went into Earth Force. It's a very complicated family. Elsewhere, Walker is ready for the fight, but the Shiva continues, and Ivanova brightens, remembering a time when her father stood up for her in public against someone who thought that she was far too young to be asking important philosophical questions. And then we shift again back to the bout, where the sands of blood are about to get bloodier, and the champion called Gior enters the ring after Walker is introduced. And we see the anti-Earther antagonist from earlier in the crowd. Walker starts poorly, with Garibaldi shouting encouragement, but having taken some licks, he manages to start working inside the longer reach of his opponent and starts drawing his white blood, as it turns out. As the champion hits the floor, it's apparent that he's probably not met someone able to take what he can dish out for a while, and also able to give it back in a style he's probably just not used to. And Garibaldi manages to stop the antagonist from intervening with some sort of ranged weapon when Caliban spots him about to take a shot. And Ivanova calls in his security team to take the guy away. We then have the strange juxtaposition of Ivanova reading a morning prayer in English rather than Hebrew so that Sinclair can appreciate it, which is rather at odds with the fight scenes. But Sinclair did say that he joined the Shiva, and he's clearly now done what he said he was going to do. We're left with the impression that sharing her memories has helped Ivanova rediscover the love she felt for her father, and so has helped her to find peace for herself, as Sinclair and Uncle Yussel comfort her. Back in the ring, it's turned into a slugfest. Both combatants are trading blows with not enough left to finish each other off. The crowd is now chanting, calling Walker the Great Heart, which is what he went into the ring hoping to discover in himself. They fight to a standstill, with the Muay Do ending the match as a draw. As their support teams patch them up, the crowd starts chanting Gior's name, but after the fighters salute one another as they did at the start, Gior tells them to shout for Smith instead, respect duly earned to his delight. Ivanova and Sinclair bid farewell to Uncle Yussel, with Ivanova ready to go back on duty. Sinclair is happy as he's had enough of double shifts, to which Ivanova retorts she'll remind him of that next time Catherine Sakai is on board. Cheeky. Walker is also on his way off station, having paved the way for humans to fight in the Muay Thai going forward, and saying he heals best in real air to Garibaldi. Caliban is also there to see him off, and Walker's final advice to Garibaldi is again to watch his back. So this is very much a filler episode. It's not an arc episode. It doesn't particularly advance anything. And in fact, it's one of the few episodes in which we don't see any of the alien ambassadors. There's no Narn, there's no Londo, there's no Delenn, there's no Kosh. So it's very much a sort of self-contained kind of character-based episode, basically. So it's one for the sports fans in a sense. But the interesting flip side here is that whilst we've seen a lot of humans hating on non-humans to this point, the antagonist in the crowd here is the opposite. He's a non-human wanting to protect their ways from human involvement. That's interesting because there are a wide range of races already involved in the Muay Thai, although not the Minbari, you notice, not really their thing. So I'm not really sure where his position is coming from. But then, when did prejudice ever stem from pure logic? On Ivanova's side, we explore her Jewish roots here, and I think it's sensitively done. I don't know a great deal about the Jewish faith, and having been through loss this year myself, I think Shiva makes sense as a way of expressing feelings that might otherwise remain contained. Like Ivanova midway through this episode, I'm not sure if I'm quite ready for Uncle Yosol yet. Maybe next year. He's clearly a well-meaning soul, but this episode is a clear reminder that the road paved with good intentions does not necessarily get you to the destination you were hoping for, at least not all at once anyway. Now, I mentioned earlier that this episode was broadcast at a bizarre time in the UK, and by that I mean, as I recall, it was broadcast very late at night and way later in the sequence of episodes than it should have been. So it aired just before season 2 started. So if you happened across it then, it would have made absolutely no sense to you as to why on earth it was being shown at that particular point in time. It would have been deeply confusing. It would have been totally out of order. So anyone coming in on it would have been justifiably bloody confused. I'd assumed, and I also hope, that it was because of the well done and quite prolonged fight scenes that it just wasn't suitable for its normal sort of 6 o'clock slot, and that it wasn't anything to do with religious reasons that it got blocked from its normal time slot. I'm sure the answer is out there. Speaking of which, Walker Smith was played by a gentleman called Greg McKinney, who wasn't in Sequest, but he was in Mortal Kombat, and that may be why he looked vaguely familiar to me. I'm not sure. Apparently, sadly, he's passed away now, as many of the cast have actually at this point in time. But again, it's something else you can find out more about online. So that's that really. Quite a self-contained episode. Doesn't really require you to have any prior knowledge of the show. Doesn't massively advance any arc elements, but it gets a certain amount of flack in the fandom, I think, maybe because it doesn't advance any of the major plot elements. But it is what it is. It fleshes out Ivanova's character a lot more, I think. It gives her more of, or gives us rather more of an insight into who she is as a person, and allows her to resolve some of her family issues, although at this point her family is pretty much devastated because she's lost both parents at this point and a brother. So as far as we're aware, she's pretty much it now for her family. So with that little sparkle of joy, I shall leave you until the next one. Thanks for listening.